Oh, that looks absolutely delicious, Walter. Did you bake it yourself?
I did indeed, Martha. It's my grandmother's recipe.
It smells wonderful. I might have to steal a slice.
People in this quiet town believed they knew every face, every family, every routine. They trusted the same man who waved at them each morning, the same man who joined community gatherings, the same man no one ever questioned. For months, everyone thought the victim's final moments were straightforward, a simple timeline. A single path. Nothing unusual. But when investigators reviewed the footage again, frame by frame, they spotted one detail that had been ignored from the beginning. A detail so small, yet powerful enough to tear apart everything they believed about this case. And when that detail was finally understood, the investigation snapped open like a trap, exposing a truth that stunned even the most seasoned detectives. What they uncovered did not fit any explanation they had considered. And the moment they realized who had been standing right in front of them the entire time, the entire case shifted. What started as a routine missing person call quickly grew into a case that challenged every assumption investigators had ever relied on. At first, nothing seemed complicated: a vanishing with a predictable timeline, a few routine interviews, and a handful of places to search. But as the hours turned into days, the evidence began to drift in a direction no one was prepared for. Every step forward revealed another question. Every answer pointed to a path that didn't make sense. And here's why this case matters. Because once the detectives uncovered the hidden link buried inside the timeline, it forced them to rethink the entire chain of events and exposed a truth that had been sitting quietly at the center of everything. Stay with me, because halfway through this story, one discovery will turn the investigation on its head, and the person everyone trusted most will no longer be who they appeared to be. She was only 23. Young, bright, and known for a warmth that made people feel at ease the moment she walked into a room. Friends described her as someone who tried to make life a little lighter for everyone else, even on days when her own felt heavy. She worked at a small community center, splitting her time between organizing after-school programs and studying for the certification she hoped would help her build a long-term career. Her dream was simple: stability. A place of her own. A routine that finally made sense. Her parents say she was the kind of person who remembered birthdays, who checked on neighbors, who never ignored someone who seemed lonely. It was one of the qualities people admired most about her, and the same quality that left her vulnerable to someone she never should have trusted. On the evening before she vanished, she had a short call with her mother. Nothing unusual. Just a quick update about her day, what she planned to cook for dinner, and a reminder about a family visit the following weekend. Her mother said she sounded calm. Not rushed. Not worried. Later that night, she messaged a close friend a simple "made it home" followed by a joke the two of them had shared for years. That would be the last time anyone heard from her directly. She trusted people easily. Too easily, some would say. She believed that giving others the benefit of the doubt was simply how life should be lived. And that trust had never caused problems before. But in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, she had grown closer to someone who seemed supportive, reliable, even reassuring. Someone who blended into her daily life without drawing attention. Someone she believed she could rely on. A choice she would never get the chance to reconsider. And this is where the story begins to shift. Because the person she placed her confidence in, the person she allowed into her routine, is the same person investigators would later examine with far greater scrutiny. On the afternoon before she vanished, she left the community center at 5:12 p.m. She walked her usual route toward the bus stop, carrying a canvas bag she took everywhere. Nothing seemed unusual. Her pace was steady. Her expression relaxed. The last confirmed sighting of her came from a small grocery store camera along the main road. She bought water, a snack, and exchanged a few words with the cashier, someone she'd known for years. But she wasn't alone when she stepped outside. Walking just a few steps behind her was a man she recognized. A familiar figure in the neighborhood. Someone who had recently begun appearing in her routine more than most people realized. The camera caught a brief moment. A nod of acknowledgement from her, a subtle gesture from him, nothing aggressive, nothing rushed. To anyone watching, it looked like two people who simply knew each other. Her mood appeared steady. No fear. No hesitation. No glance over her shoulder. If anything, she almost looked relieved to see him. That was the part investigators would struggle with later. She continued down the sidewalk, crossed the street, and turned into a narrow lane that led toward her apartment complex. The man followed at a casual pace, hands in his pockets, staying far enough behind to avoid drawing attention, yet close enough to keep her in sight. But what investigators didn't understand at the time was that this moment, the one captured so clearly on that grocery store camera, wasn't what it appeared to be. The next morning, she didn't show up for work. At first, no one panicked. She was known to take occasional personal days. But by evening, when she still hadn't responded to messages or calls, her family contacted authorities. When officers arrived at her apartment, they found the front door locked, with no signs of struggle. The living room looked untouched. Lights off. Everything neatly in place. But then came the first detail that made investigators uneasy. Her phone, the device she relied on constantly, wasn't inside the apartment. It wasn't in her bag. It wasn't anywhere she would normally leave it. Hours later, a jogger discovered it discarded near a drainage ditch 2 miles away. No cracks. No mud. No signs it had been dropped in a hurry. It looked deliberately placed. At the apartment complex, first responders noticed another detail: a small bedroom window opened just a few inches, but the dust around the frame was undisturbed. It looked staged, positioned intentionally to draw attention, yet untouched, as though meant to suggest someone had left, when they hadn't. And the car she drove occasionally, a vehicle she rarely used at night, was found parked in a completely different neighborhood, facing the wrong direction on a quiet residential street. No fingerprints on the door handle. No sign she had ever been inside it after the grocery store sighting. And then officers noticed something that made their stomachs tighten, a detail so out of place it threatened to collapse the entire timeline. Once detectives reviewed her phone data, strange inconsistencies surfaced. Someone had attempted to unlock the device repeatedly between midnight and 2 a.m. The attempt stopped abruptly, as though the person trying to access it suddenly realized they were leaving a trail. Her final text messages didn't match her usual tone. They were short. Uncharacteristically vague. And one message sent to a friend at 11:47 p.m. contained a phrase she had never used before. A phrase her family insisted didn't sound like her at all. Neighbors reported hearing footsteps in the hallway between 1 and 2 a.m., but no one saw her leave. No lights turned on. No vehicle engine. Nothing that suggested activity inside her apartment. A resident 3 doors down claimed they saw a man sitting in a dark sedan earlier that evening, but police initially brushed it off as unrelated. A simple sighting with no connection. But the most telling clue, the one that could have broken the case open days earlier, was dismissed entirely. A small item found near her mailbox that clearly did not belong to her. A piece of evidence placed right where investigators should have paid attention, but didn't. The biggest clue was right there in front of them, but no one realized what it meant. By the end of the first week, 3 individuals stood out in the investigation. The first was the obvious one, a recent ex-partner. Their breakup had been strained, and messages between them revealed tension. But his alibi, though thin, placed him across town that night, verified by 2 co-workers. Still, detectives kept him on the list due to motive alone. The second suspect emerged from a misleading trail. A neighbor who had given conflicting statements about seeing her return home. His behavior was uneasy. His story shifted slightly each time he spoke. But as investigators looked deeper, his timeline eventually checked out. His discomfort came from fear of being blamed, not involvement. The third was the person no one paid attention to. A figure who blended into daily routines. Someone present in small ways, yet never scrutinized. Someone who, on camera, seemed helpful, even harmless. Someone she had begun trusting without fully realizing how much space they had taken in her life. detectives believed they were closing in. Until they uncovered one detail that didn't fit any of the suspects. This was the moment everything changed. Investigators went back to the grocery store footage, the same footage they had already reviewed dozens of times. But this time, a junior analyst noticed something in the corner of the frame. A reflection. Barely visible. But unmistakable. It showed her speaking briefly to someone completely unreported. Someone who wasn't the man walking behind her. Someone who had been there all along but positioned just outside the main focus of the camera. This discovery challenged every assumption the investigation had been built on. Phone records now placed a different individual near her apartment at the exact time she disappeared, a person who had confidently claimed they were nowhere near her. And when DNA results from a minor item found near her mailbox came back, they matched someone with a respected position in the community. Someone trusted. Someone with access. Someone whose involvement upended everything. The timeline was wrong. Every conclusion built so far collapsed in an instant. The killer wasn't who anyone thought. And for the first time, detectives realized that the case had been shaped by a sequence of misleading impressions carefully arranged to point in the wrong direction. Once detectives realized the timeline had been built on a false foundation, they returned to the evidence with fresh eyes. Every item, every recording, every movement was studied again, this time with the understanding that the person guiding the narrative from the shadows had been far more strategic than anyone first realized. The most significant progress came from digital forensics. Analysts pulled the victim's phone from its evidence locker and began reconstructing fragments of data that had been deleted. It was a slow, meticulous process, but within hours, something unexpected surfaced. A sequence of location pings that didn't match the path she usually traveled. These pings placed her device near a service road at 9:18 p.m., a location the original suspect had no connection to. But someone else did. Someone investigators had considered only a background figure. Someone who claimed they were home the entire evening. Meanwhile, detectives reanalyzed the parking location of her vehicle. Earlier, it had seemed like a random spot where someone abandoned it. But when officers reviewed doorbell cameras from homes nearby, they caught a brief glimpse, the shape of a figure exiting the driver's side and walking away calmly, almost as if they expected no one to notice. The silhouette was unmistakably tall, slight lean to the right when walking, a distinct shoulder movement that matched someone from the victim's daily life. Someone who had never been considered a threat. And then came the second breakthrough. An officer reviewing interview recordings noticed something peculiar during a conversation with the unexpected suspect. The way they recounted the timeline didn't align with the weather patterns that night. They described the evening as warm and clear, but the record showed a sudden light rain at the exact time they claimed to be outdoors. This wasn't a simple mistake. It was a misstep, one that exposed cracks in a carefully rehearsed story. Forensics added more pressure. A small fiber collected from the victim's canvas bag overlooked previously carried a match to fabric found inside the suspect's home. A match so specific that it narrowed down the list of potential explanations to almost none. Detectives now had three converging lines of evidence. The digital footprint that contradicted their alibi. The silhouette walking away from the vehicle. And the fiber connecting the victim directly to their environment. One investigator, reviewing the case, exhaustion etched into his face, said the moment all three pieces aligned felt like watching a locked door silently swing open. They finally understood, the person who had moved quietly through the background of this case had been orchestrating every misdirection. And yet, the most revealing discovery was still ahead, hidden in the shadows of the CCTV footage that started everything. The turning point arrived late at night, as investigators re-examined the grocery store footage for what felt like the 100th time. The small reflection the junior analyst had noticed earlier now became the center of attention. For hours, experts enhanced the frame, adjusting exposure, isolating shapes, and sharpening edges. Eventually, a faint figure emerged, standing just outside the door, half obscured by a rack of merchandise. The angle hid most of their face, but a single detail made the room fall silent, a distinctive wristband worn only by staff of a nearby facility. A facility where the unexpected suspect worked. This discovery tied them to the location, but investigators needed more than a reflection. They needed confirmation. So they pulled additional footage from a small shop across the street, footage no one had sought earlier because the camera faced a delivery area. At first, the video showed nothing but dim light and movement from passing cars. But then, a shape drifted into the frame. The same wristband. The same lean. The same controlled pace seen near the victim's vehicle. It was enough. Detectives secured a warrant. When they entered the suspect's residence, what they found removed any remaining doubt. Inside a storage cabinet, wrapped neatly in a plastic bin, were items that belonged to the victim. A keychain her family had given her, notes from her training program, and the missing charm she always kept attached to her bag. There were no signs of panic in how these items were stored. No attempt to destroy them. Everything was placed in deliberate order, as though each object had been set aside with a calm hand. But the most revealing discovery was a notebook, one that documented interactions with the victim over several months. Short observations. Times. Locations. Patterns in her daily schedule. Notes about conversations she didn't even remember having. All written by someone she believed was simply kind, helpful, and trustworthy. The investigators realized that the friendly neighbor, the supportive acquaintance, the person who blended seamlessly into her routine, had been studying her movements with precision. This was not an impulsive crime. This was preparation. When the suspect was confronted with the evidence, their initial confidence dissolved. Their alibi crumbled. Their explanations twisted into contradictions. And as detectives laid out the sequence of events, each detail tightening the circle around them, the truth became undeniable. The very person she believed she could rely on. The person who walked behind her in the final footage. The person who moved silently through her life. Was responsible. The investigation had finally arrived at the one answer no one wanted, but everyone knew was true the moment the pieces aligned. In the days following the suspect's arrest, the community struggled to process the truth. Many knew this person. Some worked alongside them. Others trusted them with everyday routines, never imagining the role they played in the victim's final night. For the family, the news brought a wave of emotions that collided all at once. Relief that the person responsible had been identified, sorrow that their daughter's trust had been used against her, and anger that the signs had been hidden in such quiet, calculated ways. During the interrogation, investigators pieced together the sequence that had gone unnoticed. The suspect had positioned themselves close to her life, gaining her comfort little by little, always appearing helpful, always appearing harmless. Their presence in the grocery store that evening wasn't chance. It was part of a long pattern of watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment. The court proceedings were tense. Every day brought new details that painted a clearer picture of how the suspect hid their connection to her disappearance. Detectives presented the enhanced footage, the fiber evidence, the notebook, and the misleading clues intentionally left to throw investigators off course. When the verdict was read, the courtroom was silent. The suspect was found responsible on multiple counts, including planned abduction and the actions that followed. The sentence was lengthy, a recognition of the careful planning and the profound impact on the victim's family and community. In the months that followed, a small memorial was placed near the path she walked every day. People visited often, some who knew her, some who only knew her story. Her family spoke about how they wanted her remembered as someone kind, someone hopeful, someone who gave trust easily because she believed in the good in people. That trust was taken advantage of, but her memory became a reminder of the importance of listening closely, watching for small signs, and paying attention to the people who move quietly in the background. Even today, investigators say this case stands out not because of how it ended, but because of how it unfolded. One subtle detail at a time, until the truth became impossible to ignore. Cases like this remind us that evil rarely shows its true face, and trust can be the most dangerous thing we give away. If there's one thing this story teaches, it's that monsters don't hide in the shadows. Sometimes, they stand right beside us. If you want me to cover more cases with shocking twists or disturbing double lives, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. And stay curious.